Hey, this is the Best Movie Year podcast. My name's Johnny Satan. The only thing I want to know is this movie alive or dead? Folks, this is the Best Movie Year podcast. My name's Dan Barrett. I'm joined here by Simon Foster each and every damn week. We are talking about a movie which, look, I'm putting it out there, I'm declaring it. This is the most confusing movie I'm going to see in this year of 2025 as we look back at the movies of 1987 through this podcast. I made the statement before we started recording saying, hey, Simon Foster, this is a confusing movie. He's like, in no way is this confusing, so either my intellect is not quite what I thought it was, or it's probably a combination of things. Or Simon is just so elevated he can understand what is absolute cinematic nonsense. But folks, let me introduce Simon Foster, the man who has the answers. Sir, how many times have you seen this movie?
Alan Parker's Angel Heart. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining into the Best Movie Year podcast. It is a film that I have seen twice at the movies. I would say 6 or 7 times on VHS. My Letterboxd account told me that I did watch this sometime in the last few years. I don't remember that moment, but I watched it again just the other night. So I would say maybe a dozen times I've seen this movie. To me, Angel Heart is a film that rewards repeated viewings because, like The Usual Suspects, which is a film that people say, oh, the more you watch it, the more clues you get. This absolutely gives you clues. And once you know the ending to Angel Heart, right from the very start, this movie tells you what it's going to do, and the rest of the puzzle falls into place. So for me, this is primo Alan Parker and one of my favourite films of the Best Movie Year ever.
So Simon, can you go and ask me the same question I just asked you in terms of how many times have I seen the movie?
Dan Barrett, just off the top of my head, how many times have you seen the movie since it was released early in 1987 to US audiences?
I've seen the movie twice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you have a follow-up question saying, when was the first time I saw this movie?
And when was the first time you might have seen Alan Parker's Angel Heart?
Within the last 48 hours.
Oh, my goodness. So you've watched it twice, first time in a state of utter confusion, and the second time in a lessening state of confusion, but still confused.
Can I go one step further in saying that until we worked out the run, like the schedule for this podcast, I'd never even heard of this movie.
My goodness me.
No. See, okay, so I thought after that I'd have this reaction from you. I was expecting that.
Yeah.
But I asked around to some of my pals who are not exactly as strangers to the ways of the movie, and I said, hey, friends who are not as strange to the ways of the movie, how across Angel Heart are you? Because I never hear anyone talk about this. Okay, and they're like, what's Angel Heart? So I think you're finding yourself in a situation, Simon, where this is a lost movie.
No.
And culturally, it doesn't exist anymore outside of those that were there for it originally.
Not at all. No. This is a film that has a very significant and very important footprint in the world of cinema, not just because it's an Alan Parker film.
I'm not talking about the footprint. I'm talking about the audience that exists for it today, because I'm talking about people roughly 45 years and under.
Your age. We're talking about people like you.
Well, that's it. So people who were maybe 7 years old when this movie came out, Simon.
Okay.
And I'm just saying that I think that you talk about it being a footprint. It probably is. The footprint is gone. It's been washed over by the sands of time.
Oh, that's beautifully said. I'm not going to argue with that. That was poetic. I tell you what we do need to do. I
came up with that metaphor myself, Simon.
Well, you can lead a horse to water, ... What we need to do is have a look at the trailer for Alan Parker's Angel Heart, starring Micky Rourke and Robert De Niro. Roll that trailer.
Mr. Angel, my client, Monsieur Louis Sacre.
Do you by chance remember the name Johnny Favorite? My interest is only in finding out if he's alive or if he's dead.
You want me to check it out? I'm a private detective paid to snoop around.
He's dead, Mr. Angel.
Well, you know what they say about slugs. They always leave slime in their tracks. Are you afraid?
Yeah, I'm afraid. I'm a murder suspect already in 2 cases.
Did you kill him?
No, but the cops might think I did. The Prince of Darkness protects the powerful.
The egg is the symbol of the soul. Did you know that? It's funny, I have a feeling I've met you before.
So the film was released March 6 in the best movie year ever, 1987, over in the US. Stumbled into cinemas here in Australia not too long after that. Now, I want to ask you, where did you spend your time watching this film? We've established that I've got a long history and have watched this film many times over, most recently on the Studio Canal 4K high-definition Blu-ray that I own of the film. It's available in Australia to rental by on iTunes or Apple or Amazon and most similar places in the US. But how did you watch it?
Look, I mean, literally, as I said, for the last 48 hours, I've been doing nothing but living the life of Angel Heart. So, look, I was kind of expecting when the twist ending happens and the revelations all start flowing that I'd have my own twist ending and I'd be like, wait a sec, no, I did see this movie. The only reason I don't remember it is because I cut open the heart of some wandering sailor.
Yep.
Okay, but that apparently never happened because I'm a fairly good person and have not, to the best of my recollection, murdered any sailors in order to steal their souls.
All right, which leads me to suggest we should read out the plot to people so that they get some idea where this kind of kooky movie is happening. Now, Mickey Rourke, being his most Mickey Rourkeiest, he plays Harry Angel, clue in the name. He's a private detective. He's contracted by Robert De Niro, whose character is called Louis Safier. Now, it's not any stretch to figure out what that name contorts to with regards to the story. He's hired by De Niro to track down the iconic singer Johnny Favourite. Now, everybody that Angel bumps into along the way ends up getting bumped off, including Charlotte Rampling and a couple of big sort of southern types. Eventually, the trail leads Angel to New Orleans, where he learns that Favourite had dabbled in the black arts, some of the voodoo magic. As Favourite's whereabouts and true identity become clear, Harry Angel learns that being hired by Safier was not any kind of random act of fate or choice, but indeed part of an ongoing puzzle. Oh, that is exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. And I've got to say, watching this for the umpteenth time like I did last night, I was so hooked right through. Bit of a muddled, sort of clumsy middle section, which sucks some of the momentum out of the film, but tops and tailed, it is a terrific piece of entertainment.
So I really didn't know what to expect from this. Well, sorry, no, that's not true. I knew what to expect from the movie, but what I ended up seeing was not the movie that I was expecting to see. So when you come into this, it is very much a detective noir pastiche. It opens in an alleyway. You see that there's a dead body there. We see a detective who's been hired by a mysterious businessman. So it's kind of, it taps into a lot of the genre expectations we have as to the way this goes. Now, because we've all seen detective movies before, we know that this mysterious businessman, played by Robert De Niro, Bobby De Niro, as I am,
you and Bobby
close
very
enough
close
to be able to, yeah. So we know that Bobby De Niro is going to be in some way not necessarily representing the truth in terms of why he's hired the person. We know he's going to have a much more personal stake than is purported to be at the beginning. Because again, we know the genre. Like, this is just kind of how it all works.
Detective noir.
Okay, but we know that we're probably about 50, 60 minutes away from finding out where his actual connection is, as we get a second act sort of revelation, maybe beginning of the third act, as we start to see that sort of all fall into place. So we're going to go on the ride. Okay, and so you start going through for that first sort of 45 to 50 minutes as they're going through all the beats of a detective noir story. It's when his investigation takes him to New Orleans, that's when everything goes completely pear-shaped, and it starts revealing itself to be a very different movie than what you thought you were actually watching.
Very true.
Now, we've already given away some of the spoiler elements of it, and if you haven't seen this movie, I apologize. But also, you press play on a podcast discussion about Angel Heart. Like, clearly, you're a little bit not quite right anyway, so...
Plus, let's be fair, we're talking about 100 movies which came out in 1987. You've had plenty of time to watch these movies.
You think we're past the boundary of...
Statute of limitations.
Did you know that in Citizen Kane...
Hey, I haven't seen it yet. Shush.
Okay. It's the sled.
All right, so we're into this detective noir film, and it all kicks off, like you say, in New York City in 1955. A very evocative recreation of time and place. This is a beautiful, beautiful looking film in many of its scenes. That opening to which you refer, a man is murdered. You've skipped over a little bit there. You see a man walking away from the scene with a cane, a walking cane, and we learn very on that one of Louis Saffier's affectations is that he's always playing with his walking cane and he's sitting in his big chair. So straight away we know that the businessman has some connection that...
Sorry, are you pronouncing his name correctly there?
I don't know. I've seen the movie like 14 times.
I think it's pronounced Frankenstein.
It could be Louis Saffier. I think it's Saffier is how it's pronounced in the movie. Louis Saffier.
Lucifer? Is that no? I've mixed it up. Sorry.
It doesn't take, man. You only have to stumble on the words a little bit, and you go, "Oh, wait a minute." So, yes, we get to that. Let's delve a little bit into the cast first of all before we sort of.
No. You talked about plot. Let's just do the plot.
And then okay. So the plot becomes very much understanding. Is
all day, Simon.
It felt like all day when we were watching it. I got to say that it's a story about this man, and as you say, we know that the detective played by Micky Rourke, Harry Angel, is somehow involved with this case in which he's been thrust. And as it unfolds, it takes on a very supernatural element. First of all, through the shenanigans of voodoo culture, and through the introduction of the character Epiphany, played by Lisa Bonet, and boy, we're going to talk about her a little bit later on. And also Evangeline Proudfoot, who's being a major character in this.
I believe you were talking about the thrust. That was actually edited out. There was 10 seconds they weren't allowed to include
in the theatrical. Now, I am going to suggest that the 4K Blu-ray that I watched, those thrusts are in there, because there's stuff that I was not quite ready for at that point in time. Plus, it was clearly a stunt sex double for Micky Rourke, because that body was not an aging Mickey Rourke's body. So,
if anyone knows bombs, it's Simon Foster.
I know Mickey Rourke's bum back to front. Don't worry. So you've got this great sort of evocative New Orleans culture. You've got this twisting, turning supernatural element. You've got Bobby De Niro right on the cusp of chewing some big amounts of scenery in this. He really does seem to have a good time playing Louis Saffier, and I was glad that he was willing to go to those places. Mickey Rourke at his most Mickey Rourkeist. Like I've said, this is peak Rourke. This is the period where he was 9.5 weeks. Then he was Angel Heart. Then he was Cimino's Year of the Dragon. I've been a big fan of Mickey Rourke since he was one of the tank soldiers in Spielberg's 1941, perhaps the greatest movie ever. He's a ridiculously handsome man. He held a unique place in 80s leading man history, and this is probably his best work.
Yeah, look, outside of some of the films he started making, sort of, I guess from maybe sort of Sin City onwards, what was that? That was like mid-2000s, right?
Early, yep.
Yeah, generally pretty unfamiliar with Mickey Rourke. So when I was watching this movie, because I mean, I kind of understand who Mickey Rourke is, but he's certainly a character that existed sort of pre me really being that interested in some of the, salacious sort of news stories around. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I knew that he was a figure of some notoriety, but he's been kind of off my cultural radar, I guess. But watching this movie, I just couldn't help but feel like, where has this guy disappeared to? Like, if you were only to see this movie, you'd kind of think this guy would be going on for years to be a pretty solid, sort of fairly serious movie star.
Yep.
But certainly not the case. It probably helps that when you get a bit further into this movie, it stops being a pretty serious movie about 45 minutes in. But, broadly, like, he holds the movie as well.
Oh, he absolutely does, and he's my MVP for this film. He's in every single scene and absolutely holds the film. And I think the plot together, we obviously differ on that, but I think it maintains its noir sort of beats and elements right through to the end. You're absolutely right. He, like I say, that unique place he holds in certainly 80s film history, but film history in general. He's got the leading man looks, but kind of the character actor skills, and that's never an easy fit for people trying to pigeonhole somebody in Hollywood. And even when he tried to to be a bit more commercial and making movies like Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man and stuff like that. He didn't seem like an ideal fit. And it took the wrestler, Aronofsky's The Wrestler, all these years later for him to have another, flash in the pan moment for him. So I agree. He should have been, an Oscar front runner, and he should have been a revered actor of his generation, but it was hard for him to find that sort of his own slot in Hollywood.
Look, absolutely. Simon, we just like to put things in a little bit of cultural context as well while we're doing this. So,
you love your cultural context. That's one of your favourite.
Context.
Yeah.
Well, because 1987 is quite some time ago, and things don't exist in the bubble. So, one of the things I struggle with when we're looking back at 1987 is when 1987 films are doing period pieces beforehand as well. Because there's a certain cultural shorthand you have when you're watching a movie, and they're talking about things like, he disappeared sort of before the war, okay, and it's 1955. Like, you don't have to think about it too much in 1987 to be able to contextualize the time frame. Where in 2025, I actually had to spend and it's embarrassing when I actually sort of figured it out, but I really had to think, how long after the war is this, and try to work out exactly when America went to the war, and sort of try to work out the ages. Because while watching this, every time that you hear about, pre-war, it just feels like it's so long ago. But this is a 1955 movie, so it's really only 12 years. Because what I was really struggling with was just this idea of Mickey Rourke and his age compared to revelation here, we find out Lisa Bonet's character is actually his daughter. Okay, I'm trying to work out how old he might have been when that was happening, because as actors, I think there's only about 12 years between the two of them.
Sure.
Okay, so obviously there's a bit of license that has to be taken there, but you have to work out, because Mickey Rourke's not like an old guy at this point. He seems like a guy who's probably early 40s, holding it together pretty well.
Yeah, I'd say that, despite his habits. He's got some nasty habits, that's for sure.
Yeah, so suddenly a man where, during this period of time, could only have been, in his late 20s. So, that's a thing you kind of have to think through.
I didn't even consider that in the film. That's something that you've brought up a couple of times, and that's a great way to watch a film. I just never do the maths on those sort of things when they're falling into place, when the characters are being revealed to me. But, all power to you for giving that thought. It's just not something that ever struck me.
Sorry, we're getting to the cultural thing here. So,
yeah.
So I think it's important to put films into a cultural context. So we like to do this by looking at the Billboard Hot 100 at the time.
Okay, sure, let's do that.
Of the week of March 7, because this came out on March 9th, okay, these are the tracks that people were listening to on their AM and FM transistor radios.
Oh my goodness, okay, this will be good.
Okay, number 1, Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi.
Boom, classic, gotta be there.
Yep, that was Holding from the week before. Jacob's Ladder by Huey Lewis and the News. You Got It All by the Jets, a song that I do not recognize by name.
I don't know that at all, no.
If I heard it, maybe. Somewhere Out There by Linda Ronstadt.
From
An American Tale.
American Tale, from Fievel's thing, yeah.
Which puts the question in my mind, surely that's a 1987 movie then, and why is it not on our list?
I know for a fact it's a 1986 movie, but why would it be?
Okay.
Why would it be taking so long for the song to register? Maybe it's
Sure.
it's a holdover. I don't know.
Look, I'll do the research while you start talking about something else, and you're just like, and I'll be doing some research. The great Bruno himself, Bruce Willis, has a track on the list, Respect Yourself, number 5 on the charts.
Yeah.
And then it just keeps on going. But I guess more notably, track number 7 here, You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party by the Beastie Boys.
Wow.
And that's on its way up the charts.
Early days for the Beastie Boys, and their first big hit, I imagine. Okay, so that does put it in a cultural context. I wonder what the songs of the period for 1955 were, which was the setting for the film.
Give me a moment.
Do you think that?
No, we're not doing that.
We're not going to do that. We're not doing that. All right, so let's talk briefly about your mate Bobby De Niro. We are in a period of films for De Niro when he was really at his peak as an actor in terms of the work he was getting. This one falls right in between a small part in Terry Gilliam's Brazil, a major part in Roland Joffe's The Mission, then Angel Heart, and after Angel Heart comes a film which may or may not be the deciding factor in whether 1987 was indeed the best movie year ever, and that is Brian Palmer's The Untouchables. So you can tell that De Niro was on an incredible run here with movies. After Untouchables, he went into Midnight Run with Charles Grodin. So he's making some pretty impressive movies. It's interesting that his credit here is special appearance by Robert De Niro. So it's an odd credit to have at the start of the film, but like you say, he had a lot of juice in Hollywood at that point in time.
Yeah, it's a strange credit. So some very brief Wikipedia research I did.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. The research I did found that he was originally offered the title role for this one, being the titular angel.
Sure.
Yeah. But he decided he didn't really want that, and he was instead looking at the supporting role. So whether that's him trying to fit it into his calendar or, what the case was. But I just kind of, I guess maybe sort of pose the question, is this a better movie with Robert De Niro in the lead than Mickey Rourke? Because I say no. I think Mickey Rourke's actually really great for this.
Oh, I totally agree. I think we would have... there's a vulnerability to Mickey Rourke's portrayal, how, he acts tough and he's kind of tough, but he says at the start he only does small cases. He's not really he doesn't want to get involved with murder, or he doesn't want to get involved with anything really dark. He only does the petty crime stuff. So we know that as this really starts to unfold and the supernatural kicks in and De Niro's really commanding screen presence, takes hold. I always felt that De Niro, even before the big reveal, I always felt that De Niro was all over Rourke as a screen presence, but that they worked beautifully off each other with that as a base.
Do you think this movie would be better remembered, or in some circles remembered and known, had Robert De Niro been the lead of this, and so it would have the credibility of being part of a De Niro filmography rather than Mickey Rourke, who obviously has not had the same longevity?
I will fire back a little bit at the assumption that it's not considered part of De Niro's filmography, because his role as the devil in Angel Heart does sort of hold a bit of cred for maybe people of my generation. This is this grey area where this 7 or 8 years between us does sort of factor into what we discuss sometimes. But if it had been a lead performance, it definitely would have been a very different film. I don't think I would... Rourke... as the mental anguish began to take hold and the crumbling of the world around him began to have its impact on him, it would have been very difficult to buy De Niro playing off that, making those moments work. I'm sure he could have, and I'm sure it would have been a very different film, but I'm glad Rourke had it.
I mean, that's not really the question I'm asking, though. I mean, I'm really just thinking about the fact that De Niro, as we look back at his career and gloss over some of those comedies circa, 2004 through to, 2020, those won't be the movies that we're remembered for. But as we think about, that sort of, amazing oeuvre that we consider to be his filmography, where he's talking, it's the leads of the movie. The 1987 movie that people remember Robert De Niro being in is the supporting tone in The Untouchables.
Sure.
It's not this film.
Yep.
Okay, but if he was the lead, I think that changes the long-term perception of this
Sure.
film.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perhaps so.
I actually think this would be considered to be a modern classic in a way that I think is fairly overlooked now.
Let's talk about let's talk about Lisa Bonet. Now, having been there in the moment when this film was released and word was coming through what Lisa Bonet was willing to do for this part, you cannot comprehend what a big freaking deal it was to see the Cosby Kid go real off the rails in this movie, to the point, and we'll have a guess at the box office a little while, but it probably hurt the box office for this film that she was willing to go so far with these performances, the voodoo dance, the chicken blood, the sex scene with Mickey Rourke's stunt double. It's to see her sort of come out of the sitcom world and do this was a huge leap and was headline making at the time.
You're saying that hurts the movie?
I think it might have. Yes, I think it took over. I think it took over the discussion about this film, about what the Cosby Kid did in this new movie, and whether it chased some of that down home sort of sitcom-y following that she had. I don't think it hurt her specifically, but I think it might have hurt the film.
I would say, and again, this is a lot of hindsight and also in part just sort of assumptions being made on my part, because culturally I wasn't really there to be part of the sort of conversations and really understand what was going on. But if you think about this as the fact that we're talking about a pretty weird, fairly offbeat movie, Okay, if the conversation's about a Cosby kid, going as far as she did, like, it's pretty graphic. Okay, like, surely that's a narrative that's better than talking about the actual movie itself. Because, like, how do you talk about this movie? It's like, oh, well, it's like a 1950s detective movie. Like, it's hard to sell that as a premise. The thing that's exciting and interesting about this movie is when it goes off the rails, but you can't really sell the movie on that because you're giving away the whole bit on it. So at least you've got something to hang the detective hat on.
Yes, you do. That's a valid point.
If I was a marketing person at the time, I don't know what I'd sell this movie on.
Yeah, it was certainly sold at, I mean, it's hard to sort of comprehend this now, but it was certainly sold as Alan Parker's latest film. You got to understand, you're coming off the guy who did Midnight Express, who did Fame, Pink Floyd, The Wall. His movie after this was Mississippi Burning. So this was a guy that had huge cred in the industry, award-winning box office cred.
That's industry cred, though. I'm talking about Joe Public. Like, Joe Public doesn't care about Alan Parker that much.
But we understood, the movie-going public at the time understood that an Alan Parker film was an event film, was a big deal, and it's because there were key selling points to this, and we saw a little bit of it in the trailer there. There were key selling points to this as it being a dark, moody, noir thriller, which still had box office pull at the time. And when you've got Rourke in there, who everyone was very hot on after 9.5 weeks, although it underperformed at the box office, but, it had become a big VHS title by that time, so people were keen to see him in a setting like that Angel Heart and Alan Parker provides, and you've got De Niro in there. So this was a big deal. I mean, this was a major release for everyone involved at the time. Maybe because they didn't get a really strong selling point, or they couldn't really settle in on an angle, or were working against the sort of kickback that people were looking at the Lisa Bonet character and what she got up to. Maybe they had to deal with that, or didn't deal with that, is what hurt it at the box office. It's hard in hindsight.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. It's all hindsight. I mean, I can't help feel that as a benefit because I don't know what else you're really selling.
Yeah. Did you recognise Kathleen Wilhoit as the flirty nurse early on? You would know her from LA Law, ER, Mad About You. She was the flirty nurse that hands over all the documents.
Okay, well, here's the part where I need to break out my favourite celebrity interview ever. Not one that I've done myself, but one that I've read. The AV Club has this ongoing column called Random Rolls, where they go through a person's filmography, and like someone who's got an extensive filmography, and they just go through roll by roll, like, what was your experience on it, and just offer like some thoughts about it.
Nice.
Kathleen Wilhoit is asked in her AV Club Random Rolls, Roadhouse, any memories of it? And she starts telling the story about how, and this is an interview from, we're talking 2025 now. When did Roadhouse come out? That was a 1988 film?
Yeah,
89, thereabouts. So it's been some time, okay? And this interview, it's like from maybe about 10 years ago at this point. So like, it's definitely a long period of time since Roadhouse, when this AV Club interview is taking place.
Sure.
And she says that even to this day, and this has been happening for decades at this point, her household will receive random phone calls through any time of the day from one of the Murray brothers, being Bill Murray, okay, or Brian Doyle Murray, or the two other Murrays, there's like John and Beppo, I forget the other one.
I don't know yet.
There's 4 Murray brothers. Like, anytime one of the Murray brothers has stumbled across Roadhouse, okay, they always just like give a phone call to her, okay? They just think that's like this hilarious ongoing joke. So they just want to talk to her whenever they've watched Roadhouse. Anyway, I just think that's a fantastic little bit of trivia, and I think about that every time that I see Kathleen Wilhoit turn up in something.
She's very young as the flirty nurse in this, and I had to sort of look up who it was, and as soon as I saw her name, I knew exactly who it was and was reminded.
Lots of makeup, and she is much younger than we usually see her in.
Exactly right, yeah, as well. Well, the other interesting bit of bit casting, and I want to jump to the scene with Elizabeth Whitcraft. Now, that's not a name that anybody knows, but she plays the woman who meets Harry Angel in a bar for some reason and gives him a bit of information, and then they go straight upstairs and start having intercourse, I think is the medical term. Yeah. And this sex scene, this was one of the few points of the movie where I felt like the producer stepped in and said, hey, we've got Mr. Sexy in a film with no sex scenes and a plot that's very confusing. Why not fix both problems this way? To the point where They even cast a Kim Basinger lookalike. Elizabeth Whitcraft looks very much like Kim Basinger, and I think they were trying to sort of play on the 9.5 weeks groove there, because that is a very gratuitous and very unnecessary sex scene just to put some developing plot points in place and to show some very attractive bosoms. So I think that sex scene was probably not something Alan Parker wrote, and probably wasn't in William Hortzberg's book upon which this is based, but which I think the producers felt was necessary.
I don't know. Like, I do think that scene is tonally a little bit out from the rest of it, but also
Yes, that's probably what I mean. Yes,
as you're trying to establish this as a 50s noir, I think that there's an important sort of need to introduce a dame into this, and the fact that she's a newspaper reporter makes her seem like a more significant character than she'll be. I think she's just there purely for misdirection. Okay, and I think that was important. Like, you needed to build something else into the film by that point, because there was nothing else that he could really investigate in New York, and you kind of needed to pad it out. But also, there's a lot of exposition that's needed to be provided, and lots of characters that needs to be introduced, and lots of ways to do that. You have to find the most interesting way to do that. And I kind of think that him meeting up with, like, you know, his dame, okay, is probably a really good way to make that just a bit more palatable to the audience. Otherwise, it's an exposition dump that's incredibly boring otherwise.
And what's interesting about Elizabeth Whitcraft, she was Joe Pesci's girlfriend in Goodfellas. She was the woman that Alec Baldwin cheats with in Working Girl. And along with Angel Heart, that's kind of all the work she does. She is now an interior designer working in Los Angeles. So it's an interesting, truncated, but memorable career for one Elizabeth Whitcraft.
Look,
tell me.
Sorry, just watching that scene, like, I think she's generally pretty good. Like, she's got a lot of screen charisma, so I don't really understand why things didn't really happen
Pan
for her.
out. Yeah, true. I've mentioned Alan Parker. I've mentioned the place he holds in, certainly at that point in time as a filmmaker. He was respected and award-winning, but it's only since his passing a few years ago that his whole career was put into perspective, as we tend to do. As well as, you know, those early films, Bugsy Malone and Midnight Express and Fame. He made an extraordinary movie called Shoot the Moon, which was a look at Albert Finney and Diane Keaton in a marriage disintegration, which, for my money, it's better than Kramer versus Kramer, which came out around the same time. He did Birdie with Nicolas Cage. He went on to do The Commitments. Evita, Angela's Ashes was his next to last film. So, I mean, it was an extraordinary career, and he was such a adaptable filmmaker. Angel Heart was like nothing else he ever did. Although there are elements in Mississippi Burning that certainly point to the, you know, life in the South and some of the issues that he discussed in that. He's in hindsight, maybe I didn't appreciate this at the time, but in hindsight, he's one of my favourite filmmakers.
I've actually seen very few of his films. I know I saw The Commitments at some point. Yeah.
I should point out that I also saw my grandfather in the phone book scene, all the Fosters that were being listed down there. There was a Thomas Foster, so shout out to you, my late grandfather, Thomas Foster. It was good seeing him immortalised on screen.
Are you still cashing checks for him at this point?
From all those birthday cards he sent me. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Well, I was thinking more the royalties and whatnot.
All the royalties, yeah, for sure. Interesting fight scene. A fist fight amongst the chairs. That was one very slippery floor, wasn't it? Those chairs were flying off in all sorts of directions.
Okay, look, I feel that if we're reaching let's talk about the fist fight chair scene, we're kind of in the weeds now. So let me just lift things back a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, so Simon, I've watched this movie twice now in the last 48 hours.
Yes.
Okay, explain to me what's going on, because I've watched this twice. I understand what the film's telling me, but once the film tells me what it is, and I've watched it a second time through, I start to see that a lot of the movie doesn't make a lick of sense. So you tell me what you think the movie's about, and let's see if this illuminates it a little bit more for me.
Sure.
What's actually happened?
What has happened was that it's a forced D&D.
Before we get to that, okay, so this movie has a very big twist that takes place within it. Okay, these days when people talk about movies with twist endings, they're looking at The Sixth Sense, they're talking about Fight Club. Like, those are probably the two, like, big twist endings that become, like, the go-to.
Yep.
Okay, and I remember watching Fight Club, and I cottoned onto the twist ending probably about, like, 10 to 15 minutes before the reveal. I remember sitting in that cinema, I remember figuring it out, and I audibly let out a, ah. And then the person sitting next to me is like, what?
What?
And I'm like, stick with it, you'll see. And then like it happened. I was
Sure
like,
enough.
okay, that's right. The Sixth Sense, I know I worked out maybe about 45 seconds before
Yeah.
they revealed the twist. Okay,
Exactly.
I was kind of, I was, they had me for almost all of it, and then I just kind of picked up on it, and then suddenly they started moving into twist mode. Okay, do you remember actually like seeing the twist on this and going with it? Like, is this a memory for you at all?
It wasn't a film where and I still don't consider it to be a twist ending kind of film. I think
Well, it's not a twist ending, but there is a reveal that takes place.
there's a
that
reveal that I was.
completely upends the movie.
Yes, but it wasn't a shock. It wasn't a surprise. I get that the character that De Niro was playing, and we've mentioned it previously in the podcast, that he is in fact the Prince of Darkness, one Lucifer, as his name suggests. The joys of this narrative and the joys of the surprises in the narrative come about when you see how it impacts Mickey Rourke's character. You see how the pieces of the puzzle fall into place, how the young soldier who was murdered in the room, and the very early scene where Harry Angel is going up the stairs to meet Louis Cypher. The room that he passes that is covered in blood is actually a callback to the murder. As I said at the start, all the clues that pop up in this film for second and third time watchers to go, oh, okay, so that led to this, and then there was this guy and that scene and Margaret Kruzmark and her father. All the elements fall into place in a way that is a really intricate but I think expertly handled puzzle that tells the story of a deal with the devil, of a Faustian pact that the devils come to collect on, and it's a revelation to Harry Angel that he was the character that he's been looking for all along.
Okay, so that doesn't really answer the thing. So the problem I have with this movie is that you've got a whole bunch of characters in this who are familiar with his previous life that are just playing along with the idea that this guy doesn't remember who he actually is.
Why would that? What do you mean playing along?
Like, because all these characters of whom he has like long and storied history with, they're never surprised to see him in the bar. Like, their relationship with him is as though he's coming through their eyes as the person we're seeing in the movie.
But it's Harry Angel who's done the deal with the devil, not Johnny, the singer. What's his name? Johnny Favourite.
But isn't Harry Angel essentially the poor schmuck that's been murdered by
Yes.
the singer?
No. Yeah, it is. That's right. But it's his outward appearance who these people are seeing. Like
Well,
Harry
see, 'cause
Angel is
they
now the
never actually-
detective.
They never explicitly say that in the movie, though. Okay,
No.
they talk about his soul. They don't talk about his body, and that's where the movie just because it doesn't make a lick of sense that it's just his soul that is taken. The film really makes sense if it's his body, but they never reference that in the film. And I know this because I've watched it twice in the last 48 hours.
But well,
Because I was trying to work
We
out
know
how they
that
talk about the body.
but we know that Harry Angel's body's been chopped up and he's been sacrificed. So the body is dead. The body is gone.
Well, see, that's exactly it. So if the body of Harry Angel's gone, okay, surely the singer is as he was, like, because Harry Angel's gone.
We might have to look into this one.
This
You may.
like it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, he literally eats Harry Angel's heart in order to be able to carry through this deal. So therefore, his body is no good. So why are they seeing him as Harry Angel and not the singer? Like, surely the presence we're seeing on screen should be the singer. Like,
Should be Johnny Favourite.
I don't get it. Like, maybe that's just something I've missed entirely. But
Yeah.
it's
No, look, it's
twice
a
now
valid
I've watched
point to
this and
bring
I'm
up.
not seeing it.
Okay, yeah, no, it's a valid point to bring up. The deal with the devil was done using the soul of Johnny Favourite, using the soul of Harry Angel, thus providing the other guy, what's his name? Thus providing
Stephen J. Singer.
Dan Florrick as the solicitor, Mr. Wineshout.
Okay, we'll talk about Dan Florrick in a moment.
All right, so let's say that it takes some It's loose with its logic in some places.
It's cool if you're stoned in the audience.
No. You're being very dismissive of a film that had a major impact on those that watched it at the time. And
Yeah, who were clearly all stoned, Simon. That's what we're getting at here. This is an audience of people who are a little creatively stimulated, if you know what I mean.
I wasn't stoned on every occasion that I watched this. I was quite sober on at least 3 or 4 times. So, I think that it is a compelling case, and it's such an evocative sort of creates atmosphere with such sort of skill and character. Like I love this film. I think we're going to disagree on this, but I do love this film.
Look, I don't hate the movie by any means. I was very thoroughly entertained by it, and when the twist happened, which I saw as much more of a twist than Simon's willing to let on that he did, I was like, oh, wait, what the hell's going on? And I had to rewind it a moment and go, wait, no, this is exactly what I thought was just happening then. It's not like the film comes out of nowhere. And there's certainly elements to it where you want to go back and it kind of syncs up, but there's just aspects which just... Again,
but isn't that all sort of synced up and in the big resolution dump at the end when Ethan Kruzmark, played by the wonderfully named Stocker Fontelier, when just before he gets his head stuck in the gumbo, that whole speedy wrap up of the plot where he explains his dealings with the devil and who Johnny Favourite was and how he came to be in
Johnny
Harry
Favourite.
Angel's body. Yeah, Johnny Favourite. How he came to be in Harry Angel's body. That kind of all wrapped it up very neatly and in a way where maybe what we're doing now is kind of the point. We sort of think back and go, oh, that was all a bit daft and a bit confusing. But in the world of the film, when you're sitting in a cinema and watching it, it all made perfect sense.
Yeah, it does, because you aren't necessarily able to go back and rewatch it going, wait, did that actually make sense? And then you start seeing it saying, well, following the narrative that we're now being told, does this sync up? And it does not.
Oh, it sort of does. It does sufficiently to make it a satisfying movie experience.
There are so many liberties that need to be taken. Okay, and that doesn't necessarily make it a bad movie, but I just kind of think that this is a movie that is best enjoyed once and maybe not necessarily gone back and revisited.
Oh my God.
At least within 48 hours.
Oh my God, I've done it like so many times. You want to mention Dan Florrick playing the young solicitor Winesap? And
only because he's gone on to this great career since this movie as just a very notable TV character actor more than anything else. Like, he's got a lot of film credits to his name.
Sure.
But I think when people are writing the biography of Dan Florrick upon his passing, they'll be referencing a very long time spent on Law & Order SVU as the police captain, which is what I think most people are known from. But people from the 80s going to the early 90s would also know him as a very memorable recurring actor who's on the show a lot from LA Law.
I would say a scene where he's in a room for a lot of dialogue with De Niro and Mickey Rourke would also be a highlight for him, I would say. Not a big lot of screen time, and he was quite young in this part, as was Pruitt Taylor Vince, who many will know as a rather portly actor with the wonky eye.
Who did he play in this? Because I saw him in the credits and I never went back and...
Yeah, no, he was the young detective, the big, disgusting, fat... You got his partner who says, "Oh, you know Ted Williams, the baseball player." That's Pruitt Taylor Vince.
It totally is. Of whom still a working character actor today. He's been cast as Pa Kent in the new Superman movie.
Has he really?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not realise that. Chickens play a big part in this movie. Do you know what I noticed for the first time in a long time? When Harry Angel,
funny looking. Is that what you noticed?
Chickens are very funny looking. When Mickey Rourke turns up to meet Lisa Bonet's Epiphany for the first time, and she's washing her hair in a way that only Lisa Bonet can wash her hair, my goodness me. As he steps through the chickens are all standing still, like they're actually guarding the path to her. It's a very weird scene, and I don't know how they got the chickens to stand still. But it's very effective along the way. So,
movie magic, Simon.
Movie chickens. Now, as we get to the end of our observations, where do we stand on the yellow eyes? Now, as we get to the end of this...
I can tell you frankly how I feel about it. It's the dumbest thing I've seen in a movie maybe ever.
I remember, and all the times I've watched this film, when I know the yellow eye scene is coming, and by the yellow eye scene I mean De Niro... Well, first of all, De Niro sort of playing the supernatural card... as big as he can, and his eyes start to glow yellow like the devil's eyes. And then a little bit later on, the little child does it. I'm thinking like, oh boy, is this like just a bit too literal? Is this a bit sort of on the nose? It kind of is.
It is.
It really is.
Question: Is Bobby De Niro playing the same character in this as he plays in 1999 in The Devil's Advocate?
Well, that was Al Pacino.
Oh, it was Pacino. Sorry, De Niro,
Yeah.
Pacino. Oh, I've been done.
Oh,
in.
done.
Been done in.
I wonder if that makes the final edit.
That'll make the edit.
The question I like to ask every week, is there a pink sweater? No, there is not, unless it's a bloody stained white sweater that's gone pink. But no, there is no pink sweater in this. What do you think it did at the box office?
Oh, look, great question. Do we know what the budget of this movie was?
Fairly significant. It was a high-end production. It was a...
Give me a dollar figure, Simon.
I don't know off the top of my head. Mario Casa, Andy Vajna production. So it was a big sort of creative roll of the dice for them. They were the guys from Karaka who were, they bankrolled some of the more sort of B movies of the period, but this was not considered that. This was very much considered a prestige pick.
Okay, well, I just spent the 3 seconds to do the research that you didn't for this segment. Look, so I know both figures now. So $18 million budget, and it didn't quite reach that in terms of domestic box office at 17 point something million.
That's right. And when you convert that to US dollars, to 2024 dollars, I should say, it comes in just under 50 million, 47.699, which made it, where did it come on the Box Office Mojo 1987 box office chart?
Oh, look, good question. I reckon it's probably a top 25 movie, surely.
Goodness me, no, 66. It was considered
Really?
quite the financial failure. In the US, it travelled well. It did well. It did well here in Australia at the box office, and it played well through Europe, where Parker and Rourke are a bit more revered. But no, it didn't do much business at the US box office at all.
Well, I would also just say that when we're talking about a financial failure, you have to consider the box office and not just like the budget of the film, and not just like how it performed in terms of the rankings for the year.
Well, that's nearly $1 million less than Some Kind of Wonderful took our film from last week's Best Movie Year
I was trying
podcast.
to remember where that was at.
Yep. Most valuable players, I think Mickey Rourke. I would also say the DOP, Michael Saracen, who's a New Zealand cinematographer. He worked with Parker through all of Parker's career, shot his films. Also did Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, 2 Planet of the Apes movies, Dawn and War, and he's still working up to this very day. So this is a beautifully shot film. The symbolism of the fan. Every time the fan turned, you knew that De Niro's devil was on the scene, and the lift metaphor was beautifully played out visually, at least. So you got a MVP?
Yeah, I do. I mean, first of all, cinematography really is gorgeous. But I would probably say the MVP for this is Cortlandt Alley.
What?
Huh?
Do explain.
Sorry, I thought you liked movies, Simon. You don't know Cortlandt Alley.
Who's Cortlandt Alley?
Okay, so Cortlandt Alley, it's not a person, it's an alleyway. At the very beginning of the movie, the sequence that sets the mood for the movie, as you see the Stephen J. Lucifer character walking down the laneway.
Yes.
Okay, it's filmed, like, I'm almost certain this is Cortlandt Alley. So what Cortlandt Alley is when you watch a movie set in New York City and you see them in an alleyway, it's almost always filmed in this exact same alleyway. The reason for that is there's an image that people have in their mind of what a New York City alleyway looks like.
Sure.
Okay, but if you go to New York City and if you're scouting locations and you try to find an alleyway that looks and feels like New York, so you're putting it on a screen with the idea the audience can immediately sense that it's New York.
Right.
Okay, there's actually no alleyways and laneways that look like that. Okay, what we see in our mind is really quite different to what we see in movie screens. So if you talk to scouting location experts, they'll say there's probably about 5 laneways that look like that actually in New York City. 3 of them you can't shoot in, okay, because you just can't get the permits for them. So that leaves 2, and pretty much always is filmed in Cortlandt Alley.
Okay.
So it's always dressed up to look a little bit different every time through, but you'll always see that exact same alley used time and time again in movies for the last 40 years.
Dan Barrett, this podcast has unveiled in you this love of location knowledge. Anyone who's listened to the Lethal Weapon podcast will know how you rabbited on for what felt like an hour about the Warner Brothers backlot that was used in Lethal Weapon and so many other films. And now here we are at Cortland Alley, who I thought was a person.
No, it's important to know your locations.
Yeah, it really is. So, with regards to the premise of this podcast, 100 movies that define 1987 as the greatest movie year ever, where does Angel Heart sit with you? Me, resounding yes, it's an 80s classic. It would fit beautifully into any decade of the last century of cinema and represent it beautifully. Over to you.
I don't know if it's a resounding yes, but it's definitely a strong yes. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is just this idea that we're here in 2025 for the last, I don't know, 5 to 8 years. I've been feeling a bit despondent about the experience of going to the movies because the big Hollywood films of yesteryear, all the programmers that we used to see, so the courtroom dramas, the detective stories, all those great bits of like mainstream, just proper adult storytelling. Okay, like they don't make them anymore. It's been a dying form of the movies these days. It's all at the lower end or it's at the higher end, and like this big chunk in the middle isn't there. But in years like 1987, they were absolutely there, and with that comes a lot of different textures and flavors. And as I think through what makes for a really good year of cinema, it's absolute movies like Angel Heart that factor into it. Okay, and it's definitely. It's gone like I think I gave it like 3.5 stars on Letterboxd the other day when I added that on there. Like I think it's a quite good, not great movie, but one that I'm absolutely glad that I watched for this 1987 podcast.
Good one. We finish on a high. That's very nice. Speaking of high, next week we're watching High McDonough. Wow, that was a beautiful segue. The character that Nicolas Cage plays in the Coen brothers' Raising Arizona. Now, tell me you've seen this, Dan Barrett.
I absolutely have not seen Raising Arizona
for the
before.
love of Christ. What did you do in the 80s? Didn't you watch any of these movies?
I watched movies that were appropriate for a 7-year-old and also movies that were inappropriate for a 7-year-old, but also movies that a 7-year-old would want to watch.
Okay, all right. So we've got...
I have seen a lot of Coen brothers movies as an adult since then. From my teen years onwards, I think I've seen almost all the Coen brothers films. So this will be filling in one of the 3 to 4 gaps.
Oh my
I
God,
have in
I'm
my
so
Coen brothers
excited.
filmography.
It is a film that I adore. Probably haven't seen for a while, but in the day, it was a VHS staple for me, as well as a couple of trips to the movie. So I can't wait to talk about Raising Arizona on next week's Best Movie Year podcast. Anything else you want to add?
I love movies and alleyways.
You do love your alleyways. Hail Satan! That was Angel Heart. Goodbye, everyone.
Farewell. Folks, if you want to find out more about Best Movie Year, check out our website, bestmovieyear.com. Also, I mean, this at the moment, we're looking at films of 1987, but who knows what years may follow. You can find Simon Foster at his little movie website called Screenspace, and that's screen-space.net. And you can find me at thealwaysbewatching.com. Email newsletter comes out every day and tells you all about the movies and TV shows that you're watching and streaming on your television sets. Folks, we'll be back next week with another Best Movie Year looking at Raising Arizona. We'll see you then.